Hi, I'm Richard McKenzie, co-author of Microeconomics for MBAs. In Chapter 8, Dwight Lee and I introduce cost structures of a firm. And we begin with the introduction of marginal cost. Marginal cost is the additional cost of producing an additional unit. And what we want to know is the structure of marginal cost over a range of output. We introduce this concept by talking about tomato planting. And we do that because I grew up on a farm and I had to plant tomatoes. I know there are 4 tasks involved in planting tomatoes. Somebody's got to dig the hole, somebody's got to drop the plant in the hole, somebody's got to water the tomato roots, and somebody's got to cover up those roots. You can imagine that if you have one person doing all 4 tasks, and that person will have to go down the row digging the holes, return to the beginning of the row to pick up the tomato plants, drop the tomato plants in the holes, then return to the beginning again, get a bucket of water, pour some water in each hole, and then return again to begin covering up the roots of the tomato plants and mounding the dirt up around the tomato plants. If you have one person doing that, there's going to be a lot of time wasted in going back to the original start of the row and changing tools or changing tasks. If you have 2, then you can divide up the task, and you can imagine that the 2 can be more productive because not as much time is wasted going back to the beginning of the row. If you add 4, then you can get optimum production because you can have a team going down the row, one person digging the hole, one person dropping the plant in the hole, one person pouring water, and one person following by covering up the roots of the tomato plants. So as you go from 1 person to 2 persons to 3 persons to a 4-person team, you can imagine that the team becomes more productive. That is, the additional output of the second worker is going to be more than the first. The additional output of the third worker is going to be more than the second, and the additional output of the fourth worker can be more than the third worker. As in fact you have a increase in the additional output of these workers, you can also imagine that the marginal cost of producing tomatoes is falling as you increase the number of workers. But we know that as you add successive units of labor to a fixed quantity of land, at some point the law of diminishing returns is going to kick in. This law simply states that as you add successive units of one resource, call it labor, to a fixed quantity of another resource, call it land, there is going to be some point beyond which the additional output of each additional worker is going to diminish. That is, the marginal output is going to diminish. And if the marginal output of additional workers is diminishing, and you're paying all those workers the same wage, then it stands to reason that the additional cost of producing additional tomatoes will in fact go up. Now we can show the cost structure that we have deduced for marginal cost by returning to a graph. We know that as you add successive units, 1, 2, 3, 4 workers, the marginal cost is going to diminish. But at some point you're going to get an diminishing marginal product, which means you're going to get an increasing marginal cost. We know that there is going to be a point of diminishing marginal product, put it right there, simply because if in fact the additional cost did not eventually rise, then it means that you could grow the world's tomato stock on this fixed quantity of land. And the reason is that we have a ratio here, labor to land. And what we're doing is we're upping the amount of labor to the amount of land. And as you up the labor to land, you get declining marginal cost. Well, we know it's got to go up at some point. Otherwise, you could just hold the labor constant and decrease the amount of land and get output, which means that if you didn't have increasing marginal cost, if you never had diminishing returns, you could just grow the world's tomato supply in a flower pot, and that's not likely to be the case. Well, so the marginal cost structure is going to be one of declining marginal cost due to benefits of specialization of, say, labor, and then diminishing returns, which is going to drive the cost up. Well, the question then becomes, what should how much should a firm produce? Well, if a firm can charge price P1, then this firm should in fact extend output up to a point like Q1. And the firm should produce Q1 primarily because the firm gets a price of P1, call that $5. And this $5 price is greater than the marginal cost there. There's that big a gap, and of course there's that big a gap there, the marginal cost here, and so forth. The firm should continue to expand in spite of the fact that marginal cost starts going up, because so long as there is a gap, a difference between the price of the good and the marginal cost of production, profits are going to be rising. So the profits will continue to rise up to this point. The firm should not go beyond Q1 because the additional cost is greater than the price of the good. Profits have got to be going down at that point. So the moral of this story is that a firm that can sell as many units as it wishes at a price of P1 should produce where price is equal to marginal cost. In this case, price is also equal to marginal revenue. That is, the additional revenue from selling this first unit is going to be $5. The additional revenue from selling the second unit is going to be $5. So the price is equal to marginal revenue. This, of course, means that a firm should produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And this is a very important rule in economics. That is, a firm should produce at the margin, where marginal revenue equals to marginal cost. Now, this is going to be a rule of production that will be used by firms no matter whether they're in a highly competitive market or a monopoly market. That is, the firm should produce where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. A monopoly's marginal revenue curve will be different than that of a competitive firm, but nonetheless, the monopolist will produce where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue. The highly competitive firm, the perfectly competitive firm, will do the same. The only difference is that monopoly's marginal revenue structure is going to be different than that of a highly competitive, perfectly competitive producer. Thank you for being with me.